Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
All right, everyone, welcome to this next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Marcus Sheridan. Marcus is a globally recognized communication expert. He's a best-selling author. We're going to talk about his books, and captivating keynote speaker. He specializes in transformational communication. And so with over 2 decades of industry experience, he's mastered the art of connecting, engaging, influencing individuals, organizations. And so we're super excited to learn all about him. Learn about building trust and transparency in this new communication era that's been highly affected by AI, and dig in on some of that. So welcome to the podcast, Marcus.
All right, Kelly, let's do this.
All right. So glad you're here. So you've had a pretty successful career as a marketing and sales leader, as an author, as a speaker. Tell us your story. How'd you get to where you are now? And what are you up to today?
Yeah, I'm going to try to give you the super fast 101. Okay. So I started a swimming pool company of all things. With 2 friends out of college in 2001. And, we pushed to grow the business. 2008, 2009, crash comes. Looks like we're going to have to file bankruptcy. But the good thing about pain and suffering is it forces us to think outside of our comfort zone and do things we wouldn't have otherwise done. And so that's when I really started to learn about the changing buyer and became rather obsessed with how buyers are changing. And from what I was reading with all these new phrases like inbound marketing, content marketing and such, I was like, okay, so what you're saying to me is I just need to obsess over my customers' questions, worries, issues, concerns, and I need to be willing to address them online. Okay, I can do that. So I said to my business partners, we're going to become like the Wikipedia of fiberglass pools. And that's what we did. I literally brainstormed every question I'd ever received, good, bad, and ugly about pools. And I created videos and articles, etc. I went online, went on our website over the next couple of years, and we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. And that led to me writing about what I was doing because it was working so well. And I was like, everybody should know this. And that led to companies starting to say, hey, can you teach us how to do that? Which spawned an agency, a coaching company today called Impact. And then other events started to reach out and say, can you share that story about your pool company and those crazy, transparent, unusual things that you did? Can you share that from our stage? And I said, yes. And as soon as I started getting stages, I was really, really exceptional with that area, like as a speaker, just very advanced. And so it just took off. And I've been speaking full time for 13 years. I still own the pool company. It became a manufacturer of fiberglass pools. I was able to sell the manufacturing side of the business. It became the first franchise of fiberglass pools in the U.S. Now there's a river pools near you potentially. I sold that as well, but I still own the original. I'm like an original franchisee, but I'm a silent partner there. I have a coaching company that helps folks do my book called They Ask You Answer. And it's done really well with over 100,000 copies now sold. And I actually recently developed an app too that's doing very well. It might come up, but it's called PriceGuide.
Very cool. That's awesome. I love 2 things about that. One, I love don't waste the struggle. I think that's great. You mentioned about, or like, that's what I always think is like, there's a, like this struggle is not for waste, right? There is a learning to be had here. And it sounds like that's where 2008 kind of forced you on like, okay, what can I learn from this? What can we do to?
You see, it's interesting, right? We always see, especially when it comes to marketing, the most innovation occurs when things aren't going well.
Yeah.
And when the economy is struggling or when there's some type of, hey, let's just send it, YOLO, right? And now we start doing those things that we know inherently we should have been doing. We just hadn't done them. And maybe we couldn't get approval or whatever. But once everybody starts, just take the handcuffs off, then you can do extraordinary things. And I think, let's be honest, marketers oftentimes fail to be the artist that they could and should be because they can't get approval for some of the most audacious ideas. And so why is this, such an important thing? Well, now if we have pain and we have suffering, well, suddenly maybe that CEO, maybe that leadership team gives you the green light that you've been waiting for because you've known inherently this is what we should be doing, but you just couldn't get it. This is why I always say a marketer's entire career rises and falls on their ability to get approval from leadership.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's right. I mean, and getting people to buy in on what you're selling, especially when some of it's not always measurable. You're like, well, I have to get there. Yesterday, we pitched our leadership team on this big concept, multi-million-dollar price tag. And we came into the meeting, we sent the pre-read, came into the meeting and thought, this is going to be a tough sell. By the end, though, it was such a great discussion around it. I think by the end they were like, that might actually work. Like, let's actually consider that. And I think that they went from a hard no when they had seen the price tag to, okay, I'm open to considering. We may need to scale it back a tiny bit, but I'm on board.
Think about what you just said there, though. This is like a really big deal, and it can't be like, we can't just gloss over it. You acted as a sales professional yesterday in a marketing capacity. And this is what is not taught in university. And this is what many CMOs have not been trained on, and you learn through trial by fire, which is if you cannot pitch, and if you cannot speak the language that leadership needs to hear, which, by the way, isn't generally marketing speak for those that are listening. I'm sure inherently many of you know this, but the most extraordinary marketers know how to speak the language of sales when they're speaking with sales, and they know how to speak the language of leadership when they're with leadership. That's not an easy task, and oftentimes it requires wisdom and experience. But case in point, yesterday you were a sales professional, and you were tapping into those sales influence skills, and it paid off big time. And that's the thing that, not to just beat this over and over, but that's the thing that's not being taught that marketers have to learn how to do.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's right. I did a stint. I've been in marketing most of my career. I was an engineer originally, but I've been in marketing for a long time. I did a stint for a year and a half as a chief of staff to a COO, who then moved into the CEO role. And I always say that role was the most pivotal in my career because I learned what executive teams care about. And so then I knew that I don't need to sell them on the colors or the name of the event or the location. I need to sell them on the ROI. I need to sell them on,
is it going to solve the problem?
What problem is it solving?
That's right.
What's the value proposition? Very clear. Yeah.
That's the only stuff that matters. They don't really care how the sausage is made in the end. They just want to know, is it going to solve my problem? And what's the ROI going to be? If we can address those things, then all of a sudden we're cooking.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, cool. That's great. And by the way, speaking of pools, have you seen the show, The English Teacher? I think
no, I've not, but I'm going to have to check it out now.
So it's a hilarious show. It's based in Austin, Texas, which is where I'm based, which is why I'm sort of intrigued by it. But one of the gals, she's a teacher, her husband decides that he has free time between jobs. And so he's going to build a pool for them. So literally every episode, he's out there with a shovel, literally digging a hole in his backyard to build himself a pool. So I don't know if that matches up with your experience in 2008 when you decided to start a pool company or the whatever that time period was. But I just thought it was hilarious. I was like, I would never think to get outside with a shovel and just build my own pool.
Well, hopefully he's on the River Pools website learning how to install that pool.
Maybe so. Yeah, I'll pay attention to that. That's funny. Okay, cool. So you referenced your book. They Ask, You Answer. Tell me about that. Like what is the book about? What's the philosophy behind it? And how has it evolved since you published that book?
Yeah, it came out in 2017. Then it came back out again, essentially 2020. And I have another version of it coming out in 2020, beginning in 2025. The whole obsession with They Ask, You Answer, or better stated, the payoff, is how can you become the most known and trusted voice in your market? And it's a beautiful framework that shows you how to do just that. But in order to do that, you have 4 fundamental pillars of becoming this known and trusted voice that most companies, even though they say they do, don't actually follow. Here's the 4 pillars. Number 1, you need to be willing to say what others aren't willing to say online. So I want you, if you're listening to this as a CMO right now, how much of the content, the messaging that you have out there, whether it's on your site or on the socials, wherever it may be, how much are you saying that the very high majority of the peers in your industry are not actually saying, or not willing to say, or too afraid to say? That's number one. Number two, you got to be willing to show what others in your space are not willing to show, specifically through video. And I'm not just saying regular video. I'm talking about showing things that you normally don't see. All right, that's number two. Number three, you have to be willing to sell in a way others aren't willing to sell. Hopefully we can talk about that one for a minute at some point. But that is, I think, marketers are going to have more responsibility to sell than they have ever had as the future continues to progress. We've got to be creative in ways that we can do that. And then finally, number four is you've got to be willing to be more human as a brand than anyone in your space. Because newsflash, nobody really cares about brands. Nobody really follows brands on social. They follow humans. And oftentimes there is a disconnect there because leadership teams can't hide behind the leadership wall and expect to really build extraordinary brands. There's a reason why Tim Cook has way more followers than Apple. There's a reason why Elon has way more followers than Tesla, because we want to follow people. And so there's very specific ways from a sales, marketing, just branding standpoint, we can be a lot more human. So those are the four major pillars. And they ask you answer the first two editions. They talk a ton about the first two, which is talking about what being willing to say and being willing to show what others are not. And there's frameworks within the book that teach you how to do that.
Gotcha. So what was the new the expanded editions, the new one coming out in 2025? Is that digging more into the fourth point? Is that how that's
No, it's digging more into all four of those. So this is in that book, in the newest edition, I present these four pillars for the first time. What traditionally the main elements, if they ask you answer 1 and 2, what people really know that book for is the content marketing strategy in there is really beautifully simple, at the same time incredible and effective. Because in there I teach what's called the Big Five. And the Big Five are the 5 subjects that all buyers want to know, but most businesses aren't willing to talk about. Right? And this lends itself to the be willing to say what others aren't willing to say. So what are the 5 subjects that all buyers want to know that other businesses aren't willing to talk about? Now, all buyers want to understand cost, pricing, etc. They want to get a sense for value. They want to understand budget. They want to know, am I in the game or not? Most businesses, especially B2B service-based businesses, are atrocious at helping people understand pricing during the research phase of the buyer's journey. It's just terrible. All right. And hopefully we can spend a little bit of time with that. Number 2, people are obsessed with problems. When I'm talking about problems, what I'm really meaning there is, what are the fears, worries, issues, concerns they have if they're considering your product? So in other words, if I'm considering something, if I'm considering buying something, let's say, something silly, in this case, like a pool. As soon as I say I want a pool, now all of a sudden I'm flooded with fears that come with buying a pool. Is it true that will I have this problem? Somebody told me that. All those are fears, worries, concerns. Let's call them problems. All right. Most companies don't want to address those. They tend to be like the elephant in the room. Okay. So it's just it's no different than, let's say I was Salesforce. One of the biggest questions with Salesforce, if somebody's using an existing CRM, is how long really is it going to take to convert over to Salesforce? It's a major fear, right? And if Salesforce is smart, they're going to really go hard at that. But a lot of software companies don't talk about the difficulties of transition because they don't want you to really think about it. They just want you to think about what's on the other side. But what you want to focus on is, what's the bridge going to be like? Because that bridge sucks, and we've all been there before. All right, that's an example of fears. So you got cost, you got problems. Number 3, comparisons. We're obsessed with comparing things online. Most companies don't address the comparison-based questions their buyers are asking online. You should be. Most don't. Shame on you. Number 4, reviews. The thing about reviews, we all know we like reviews, but what makes a review effective is when it talks about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Call it the law of the coin. Every coin's got 2 sides. You got to be willing to show both sides of the coin. If you look at most reviews that companies share, and a lot of them don't share any at all, but they don't show both sides of the coin. So let me give you an example. If you're selling some software, if you're selling some product, doesn't matter. You should be very explicit with who you are, but also who you're not a good fit for. Everybody does the first part. Almost no one does the second part. But the second part is where you become the most known and trusted brand, because you're willing to say, again, what others aren't willing to say, which is, hey, we're definitively not a good fit for you if this, this, and that. And we're not talking about snarky, silly, sarcastic. We're talking about very serious. Hey, if you fall in this category, this product, this service is not a good fit for you. Okay. And then finally, number 5, best, most, top, anything that's extreme, we'll just call it best in class. We love to research best plus another phrase. Is prolific. So those are the big 5: cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, and best. What we know is this drives the search economy. We know that this is what buyers want to know before they reach out to a company. This is what they need in the buyer's journey to say, okay, I'm informed enough to reach out to this company. Yet most businesses still in 2024, which is stunning, don't want to talk about these 5 things nearly enough, which is why for the most part, their content fails to get the traction that they wanted to get. You fail to become as trusted as you could be. And you're wondering, why is this not generating the leads? Why is my sales team not benefiting from this? Why are we just not standing out? It's because you're not really talking about the stuff that everyone wants to know. And oftentimes you're afraid to because there's going to be pushback from your team.
Yeah, I love that. I think this is part of the transition we've been trying to make, but I think we think about it as kind of in that discovery process, right? We're having those first conversations with a prospect. How do we ask the right questions? How do we listen more and talk less to understand what the challenges they're struggling with?
Can I say something about that, Kelly?
Yeah.
This is kind of a sales thing, but I just got it because I'm very sales and marketing oriented. Actually, really what is the through line of my life is how do you communicate in a way that connects? So I do a lot of sales training for big and small companies, and I do a lot of marketing strategy for a lot of companies. It's all the same thing, though. So like, how do you connect with your audience? Sometimes it's one-to-one, sometimes it's one-to-many. Do you know what's shocking about sales teams these days?
What?
Over 90% of sales teams do 1 role play training or less a year. And then they wonder why they stink at asking questions. It's because we're too busy practicing our communication skills on potential customers instead of practicing those skills on our peers that work with us every single day. It's wild to me. How did this happen? We've got this problem where we sit there and have these sales meetings. Sometimes they're even called trainings, which to me is a crime against humanity. And all it actually is we're reviewing pipeline and talking about pipeline status. But what we're not doing is practicing how we communicate in such a way that we create immediate connection with our audience, immediate breakthroughs. We ask better discovery questions than anyone's ever asked before, that the receiver says, no salesperson has ever asked me that question in my life. That's powerful. And that's a lost art. And this is why managers need to be better. And the last thing I'll say about this before I end my little rant on this, and I'm sorry to get off track, but you have a management problem where the managers are afraid to fail in front of their team. And because they're afraid to fail in front of their team when it comes to live, let's say, role plays, they just choose not to do them. And so instead, we just talk about pipeline. And nobody's really growing, and we're not developing the leaders that we could because of it.
I love it. I think that's probably right. I mean, I don't know where we are on that, but I've certainly, through my experience at multiple companies, I think the role play training is probably limited. And I think role play, the reason where it's valuable is sales roles change often too. I think role play as an SDR is different than role play as an AE, and different than role play as a GAD, and different than role play as a solution consultant. So thinking about all the different roles you could be in a sales capacity, or even as a CS person, I think that that makes a big difference. So,
well, it's a skill. It would be like saying, this is what sales teams are essentially doing. They're sitting there and they're talking about, let's say they're a football team, doesn't matter the sport, and they go to practice, but instead of going out to the field to practice, they go into the film room and they talk about the game. But they never actually hit the field to practice the plays. And then they wonder why it doesn't translate come game day. This is literally, I see this over and over again. Do you know that 90% of sales teams, even though many record their sales calls in the B2B space, 90% don't observe one of their own sales calls a month? Why are you even recording?
Yeah.
So I know this is about CMOs, so I don't want to distract, but I'm passionate about this subject, as you can tell.
No, I think it's absolutely, I think it's absolutely right. I mean, we have, for most CMOs, I think have the SDR the business development teams in their marketing organizations because they become the qualifications of the inbound leads. They're out hunting.
Bridge.
And so it's super relevant to me because I think, oh, I'm sitting here writing notes of thinking, ooh, what are ways that we could help the SDR team with role play, with listening to their gong calls, all those things to be able to continue to develop each other and listen to each other's so that they're able to coach each other and help and give objective feedback. So I think that's really interesting. One thing is you're talking about this. What are ways I think that lead marketers, let's say, or maybe it's sellers, but marketers and CMOs can leverage like these communication vehicles, let's say, whatever you're thinking about, especially as you talk about this, the way you approach that they ask you answers, showing them, for example. How do you use that to create great experiences? So how do you make that? I know you said that there's sort of a how-to checklist in your book. Talk us through some of that show, and what does that look like with an audience?
So let me combine a couple for you here, which is the first three. Be willing to say, show, and sell in a way that nobody else is. And there's a few different stats out there, and Gartner's been talking about this too, but one of them is 75% of all B2B buyers today say they would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. All right. Now, what does that mean? That doesn't necessarily mean we hate salespeople. It just means that we don't want to talk to a salesperson until we are good and ready, until we feel like we're not going to make a mistake. And every single person is getting to the point where they're saying, I just want to feel like I'm in control of this buyer's journey. It's really even no longer a sales process. It's a buyer's journey more than anything else. And so you know how it is. You have two choices here. You can look at that trend and say, woe is the world, woe our businesses, sales teams are going to be obsolete, which I don't believe is actually true, because what it means is, hey, there's a clear trend in the marketplace. Everyone is doing it. And so we can either use it to our advantage or it can be to our disadvantage. Well, let's use it to our advantage. Well, if there's this thing called, let's call it the seller-free economy, that's what I call it in the book. If there's this thing called the seller-free economy, and that's where we're headed, well, how do we use that and utilize it to our benefit? Well, you have to embrace self-service. Of course, what is self-service? Self-service is when we allow the buyer to do things that traditionally in the past they would have had to have done by speaking with a human first. Now, there's a bunch of ways to do this. I'm just going to give you a few of them, okay? I'm just going to rattle a few off, Kelly, and then I'll give you some examples.
Yeah.
So the first one would be self-assessment. Self-assessment is when somebody comes to your website, let's say, and they get some type of readiness score. So let's say you offer a particular software or product. Maybe you had some type of interactive, we'll call it a quiz, although I hate that word, some type of interactive experience that with them answering a certain set of questions, they're able to get a score, and that score says, hey, based on what you've just said, you are a 7 out of 10 in terms of your need to replace such and such software with your company. All right, that's an example of a self-assessment tool. One of the best ones I've seen for that is a company called Score App that was made by my friend Daniel Priestley. So next one would be, so we've got assessment. Next one would be configuration, self-configuration. So self-configuration is just when you allow someone to build their thing. Maybe it's their plan, it's their product, but when someone feels like they're designing the thing before they've talked to you, now the sunk costs increase, and this feeling of self-ownership now comes into play because they're more invested in your thing than someone else's thing, because with your thing, they built it, they configured it. So that's self-configuration tools. They're going to be really big going forward. All right. Then you've got what is self-scheduling tools. And a lot of folks have started to use these, but self-scheduling is when you schedule time to talk to a salesperson without being forced to talk to a human first. Now, let me give you one crazy experiment I've been doing real quick that any market in the world would just be like, holy cow, if they do this. I've been running this with a few clients, Kelly. It's wild. I've got a few clients where I was able to convince them, on your self-scheduling tools, I want you to show your entire sales team. Show their faces, give a bio for each one, and maybe even a video. Now, what happens, and this is literally across the board as we've been doing this experimentation, when someone gets to choose their salesperson, their advisor, whoever you want to call it, instead of being given a salesperson that's next in queue, guess what? Closing rates every time, doubled. So imagine if you went to my, whatever, swimming pool company right now, and you saw there's 4 different designers that you could work with. You get to read about them and you just get a sense for them, and then you choose them. Completely different experience for you. Some costs again increase, your personal investment increases, and because of that, you're way more likely to buy. That's why closing rates double. Isn't that wild? Crazy wild.
That's amazing. I
Isn't
think
it
that
cool?
sort of puts the power. Part of this, I assume, this self-service mindset or this sellerless experience, as we talked about, a seller-free experience, is because it empowers the buyer to be in the driver's seat and not feel like they're being sold to.
That's what they want. That's what they want. Now, here's what's crazy. When you do these well, you end up getting way more leads, and so you actually need more salespeople, which is this is the thing, folks. Okay, there's a couple more that I wanted to tell you about. And you got self-selection, I call it. And self-selection is when somebody needs to make a choice, but they're just, not sure. And you ask them a series of questions that are unbiased that allows them to choose. Let me give you a really simple example with my swimming pool company, and then I could flip it to B2B very easily. But with my swimming pool company, we sell only in-ground fiberglass pools. But some people want a concrete pool, like you're in Arizona, right? No, where are you at? You're in Austin, all right? So in Austin, a lot of people have concrete pools in Austin. Fiberglass isn't as prevalent. And then you also have what's called vinyl liner in-ground pools. So there's 3 types of in-ground pools. There's a tool on my site, River Pools, which literally, it says, are you debating between fiberglass, vinyl, concrete, not sure which one? Take this simple interactive, quiz recommendation tool, and you'll get an honest recommendation. And every single day, we have dozens and dozens of people take it where we recommend a different product than what we sell, because clearly ours isn't a good fit. But what happens with that is when they are a good fit, they come to us and they say things like, I already know what pool I want. I did that thing on your website, and definitely I am a fiberglass person, right? See, these are the things that we want them to choose beforehand. I look at a lot of these SaaS companies out there, and they've got, it's like every single one's the same way. You got your pricing page, you got this good, better, best, call us for some crazy enterprise solution. Okay, folks, there's so many better ways to do this, because it is very hard for someone just to look at the billion features that you have and say, clearly, I should go this route. And so instead of that, somebody like a HubSpot, a Salesforce, or any of these companies, they should have a series of questions that asks you what a salesperson would ask, and then in an unbiased, not trying to just upsell you way, and then based on that, give you a recommendation for your answer. Okay, so that is self-selection. Anytime there's choice involved, very powerful. And in every sales process, there's choices that people are trying to make. They want to make those choices. And really, your sales team wants them to make those choices before you have that, first big conversation. So more tools like that online are so stinking powerful. And the final one, and the one that so few want to do, but my gracious, it's so outrageously effective, self-pricing tools. And self-pricing is when you allow someone to get a pricing estimate for their product or their service before they talk with a salesperson. Okay. And what's so interesting about this, if we did a perfect line of the buyer's journey, okay, on one end, we had the beginning of the journey when they know they have a problem. So let's assume they know they have a problem. And on one end, they have the end of the sales process. What's so fascinating is you want to talk about pricing very early on the marketing side, and you want to talk about pricing very late on the sales side. That's the proper way to do it. And it leads to the most conversions. So from a marketing perspective, if you never talk about it, you get much less conversions. We got the data on this than if you actually talk about it. Because if you don't talk about it, you're not teaching the world what defines value. And there's just a ton of people out there that literally are just trying to figure out, am I even in the game? Can I afford this at all? Is there any chance that we could do this? Could it fit, in Q1 for this year? And so what we know also, which is crazy, Kelly, is lots of times people won't reach out because, the classic call us for price, which I like to call the middle finger of the internet. But you have this call for price, and somebody is looking at that and I don't want to call because, and this sounds weird, but it's true, because they're almost too embarrassed to admit. They don't want to have to admit to the salesperson that they don't have the budget for it. And so instead of having to go through the conversation and experiencing that embarrassment in their mind, they're just I'm just not going to call. I'm not going to play. See, this is dumb. So when companies are willing to give somebody a feel for that up front, then it's magic. I actually recently developed a tool. I was telling you about this app, and V1 is out. V2 is coming out soon. And it's going to be even more robust. It's going to be even more beautiful, but it's called PriceGuide.ai. And what it does is it allows any company, doesn't matter what you sell, of course, using AI to create a pricing estimator that you can design and place on your website within 30 minutes time. Like, you can be producing leads. And here's what's crazy about pricing estimator tools. And I do recommend that you put some type of form in order for them to get the actual price on it, some type of gate on it as a marketer. Instead of, I've seen some just do like sliding scale tools where you can, it's just, you see it and you can play with it a little bit, but that's not very powerful. What's powerful is when they answer a series of questions about what they're interested in. Those questions are factors that would drive cost up or down. And like, you take a tool like Price Guide that understands what those factors are because you put in your industry, and then the AI says, okay, well, if you're in this industry, if you're selling this service or this product, there's a good chance that you have these questions that you have to ask in order to give someone a price. And then you can modify the questions that AI gives you. You can put in your cost variables, and then you get the code from it. You put it on your site. And what we've seen again and again, Kelly, is the typical company generates 3 to 5 times more the number of leads they were getting once they have added a pricing estimator to their site. And it's got to be very visible. So to give you an example, River Pools is a manufacturer of pools. We don't set the end price. We have dealers that set the end price. Can I have a pricing estimator on my website? Heck yeah, I can. We were the first manufacturer in the world that did, as a matter of fact. And that thing is incredible. I mean, it's nothing for it to get 100 leads a day during the summertime, because people are able to do this, and they're able to build and design and price out their swimming pool. And so in the process of doing that, once again, that core psychology of sunk costs increases because they're more and more personally invested in you. And then they're able to get that price range. And so when you have a conversation with them, they're much more informed, and everyone wins because of it. So I'm very, very excited about that. And I'm literally creating the HubSpot of pricing estimators is my vision. So these are the 5 self-service tools. They are amazing. Every marketer should use them. Very few are doing them, but they're going to be taking over your industry soon. And so if you're listening to this, I really, really hope you're taking action on at least on 1 or 2 of them.
I love them. Yeah, I wrote down all the notes. I have like little actions next to each one of things I want to take back to the team. So super helpful for me. I assume then also helpful for anybody else who's listening who probably is struggling with similar things that I'm struggling with. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. So Price Guide, good transition there, is leverages AI to run the back end of it, I assume. Yeah. So as you think about that, right? You're using AI to build this tool for pricing. You're also big on communication and the way we communicate and saying the right things and human touch and all of those. Mm-hmm. So AI is obviously transforming every single part of business and the way that we're operating. So how do you see AI continuing to impact not only the market, but really about how sales and marketing work together, how they communicate, but also how do we do that without losing human touch? What is that?
Yeah, I think this is an amazing time as a marketer. Lots of opportunity and lots of difficulty, because let's be honest, it's harder to get found today. It's harder to stand out. There's a ton of noise. AI means there's more noise than there's ever been. And we also are seeing very clearly that for the majority of companies that have really been great content marketers in the past, that they're seeing a dip in traffic. And how do you not? I looked at a stat this morning that said 60% of all Google searches end up in a no-click scenario. All right? So 60% of all Google searches are no-click result. They don't even go. Now, that number was 50% a few years ago.
Until the switch over with AI generated.
Yeah. So where do we think this is headed? Yeah. And of course, how many companies, how many marketers built their house on Google search? I mean, a lot. And look, I built an extraordinary swimming pool company primarily almost on Google search, but I couldn't start over today and do the same thing and expect to get the same results. Yep. I mean, it is light years of a different time period today. And so we're entering this age of signals where we have to really please 2 parties as marketers. We've got to please the marketplace, humans. we've got to send them these signals that, hey, this is there's just a brand here and they solved my problem and I really want to work with them. And then there's the signal to AI, because when AI started in November 2022, when it really came on strong, ChatGPT, whatnot, most of us were seeing that as a creation tool at the time, but it's quickly becoming a recommendation tool. And as it becomes a more and more recommendation tool, it means less and less search results again. And so it's just like people are going to say, if for the marketers that are still just obsessed with building their house on Google search, that house is sand and it is not a good idea. And so what can we do? Well, we've got to be more diverse than we've ever been as marketers. I think we need to go much stronger into things like YouTube, into social. We've got to be great with video, start thinking a lot more like a media company instead of just a software company or a database service. I mean, we really got to think like media companies. Media companies think differently. And so we have to think like that. And I could go on forever on this, but I think one of the big keys to this, and really everything I've been saying is a little bit thematic to this, which is we got to get great with disruption, Kelly. And disruption has to become a part of your core as a marketer. What's interesting is disruption is actually quite easy to do, and it's usually right underneath of our nose, and we don't realize it. Let me give you an example, if I could. So just the other week, I was meeting with one of the largest brands of it was a plastic food container manufacturer. So if you go to the grocery store and you get some food from the deli, and they put it in one of those like little plastic containers for you that locks, or if you go to a salad bar and you get a salad, you use these types of containers, and they make these containers, and they send them all over the world. So I'm doing essentially was like a workshop with their leadership team, their marketing team, sales team. We're trying to find ways to disrupt, and of course they're so busy thinking like the business that they're not thinking outside the box. And one thing I try to do is help people start to think differently. And so I said to them, are your plastic containers, these food containers, are they just like everybody else's? Is everybody making the same in the industry, or yours better by chance? They said, oh, ours is better, Marcus. I said, okay. So how are yours better? Well, how it works, Marcus, is ours seal much better. And there's a safety seal on them. And so, you could have, let's say, a salad with a ton of salad dressing, and you don't have to worry about it. If it flips over in your car, it's not going to leak out into your car because there's a really strong seal to it. I said, oh, wow, that's interesting. I said, so based on that, is there a standard by which these plastic food containers have of a rating system for how well they hold liquids, how well they seal, how liquid proof essentially they are? They said, there is no rating scale on that. I said, is it possible for us to come up with a rating scale? They said, well, yeah, it would be possible. Now, here's what's interesting about it. Just think about it for a second, Kelly. If they come up with this scale of, let's call it leak proofness for these food containers, and then they start to publish it and talk about it very just drive the stake in the ground. They talk about it a lot online, and then they start labeling their product with it. Suddenly something's going to happen in the industry.
Yeah.
People are going to realize, okay, if it's a rating of a 2, well, then that can hold my cookies. If it's a rating of an 8, that's for the salad bar and the salad dressing. Totally different scale. Yeah. Because that doesn't exist. But if it exists, now suddenly the end user, which is the grocery stores of the world, they start saying to the manufacturers, what's the rating of this container? Because I need to know the rating if I'm going to make an order. Well, guess what? If there's only one manufacturer that comes up with the rating, everybody else has to fall in line. So now the rule breaker becomes the rule maker. Everybody else becomes the rule follower. And that, my friends, is the art of disruption. So that's what we're going to do, but that's possible. I've never found a company where I didn't just ask a few questions and I would say, so is there a scale for that in the industry? Is there a rating for that in the industry? And they're always like, no, there's not. Like, well, guess what? We're going to do that. And then all of a sudden, game changer, and you set the conditions for an entire space. That's disruption.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm like going through all the scenarios in my head thinking, okay, what could we do with that? Could we, what things could we scale? Could we rank? Could we own in terms of that positions us in a big light, but also, is a differentiator that somebody cares about, which is great. Like the, sealability of a thing. I think about like recycling levels, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
100%.
bottom of plastic, right? Like somebody
100%.
decided this thing is the best for recycling and this one's the worst one for the environment.
Yes.
And we're going to sell them.
Very smart. That now we're cooking, right? And this again, this is possible in any industry. You said differentiation. My friend Sally Hogg said she loves to use the phrase different is better than better. And this is something that can be hard for marketers to understand sometimes. But, just think for a second about what I think is one of the best models we've seen in years as any type of CMO. Well, the best models, examples of this we've seen is the folks at Liquid Death, right? Liquid Death got into one of the most competitive industries in the world, which is the water, beverage market, retail. Everybody's battling for space. And they said, we are going to do like nothing about the way bottled water is marketed are we going to follow. We're going to break every rule, even though the product inside of our containers is the same as everyone else. What is going to be different is we're going to market like alcohol/energy drink. Now, what's really wild about Liquid Death is they have the third most followed social media for a liquid beverage other than Monster and Red Bull. And they've only been around a few years. Now, here's where it gets really wild, Kelly. And this is why us CMOs, we have no excuses, is because recently I think it was their CMO was asked, how big is your creative team? He said, our creative team can fit in an SUV. Think about that.
Yeah. So less than 8.
Less than 8. They're fast, they're nimble, and they're just getting it done. And they're breaking all the rules in the industry, right? Rule breakers become the rule makers. Mm-hmm. And that's why when I say what others aren't willing to say, show what others aren't willing to show, sell in a way that others aren't willing to sell. If you look at in many ways where our conversation has gone and the through line of it, we're constantly talking about things that is outside of the norm. And that's why the great marketers today have to be willing to be courageous and bold and not do it the way it's always been done.
I love it. I love it. I have so many notes. This is super helpful. I can't wait to go back and listen to this because I feel like it will re-inspire me every day. I know that we're going long on time, so I'm going to wrap us up, but I have loved this conversation. I hope people get lots and lots and lots of creative ideas coming out of this, and hopefully people reach out to you to dig in even further. Before we part, tell us, maybe we've hit it with pools, maybe we've hit it with some of these ideas off the script, just one fun fact about Marcus Sheridan. Anything you think people would find intriguing to learn about you?
I have a registered disc golf course at my house, and I play disc golf all over the world. I also own a charter fishing company and have a pretty popular YouTube channel called Saltwater Fishing University, where I teach people about fishing. So fishing and disc golf are huge passions of mine. Okay. And a lot of people would have, they would not guess that.
Yeah. Disc golf is one of those. We have a guy on our team who's really into disc golf. And I ask him these random questions because my neighborhood has a disc golf course, I guess. Yeah. All I will say is there are those chain bubble, whatever they're called.
Yeah, they look like bird cages.
Yeah, exactly. All over the neighborhood. But I don't have a map. I don't have a starting point. I don't know how to.
It's one of the fastest growing sports in the world, Kelly.
Do you just awesome. Pick a place to start and we're going to be like, okay, we're playing from here? Or is there actually a method?
You can do that, but it's an actual course, just like a golf course is, with holes that are, marked and whatnot. And there's tons of different types of discs, or like traditionally Frisbees, but they've been modified, and they throw different ways and they do different things. And it is, like I said, it's one of the fastest growing sports in the world, pickleball and disc golf.
Yeah, that's where it's at, right? And you're trying to get it between the chains?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And get locked into the cage? Okay. Very cool. Well, I will have to figure out how to navigate this one in my neighborhood because it's right here. Very cool. If listeners want to connect with you or follow you or learn more about you or get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, if you're listening to this, find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find and I'm dang awesome on LinkedIn. So if you're looking to get some really great content 4 or 5 days a week, that's me. I'm very engaged there too. So if you reach out, if you message me, so let's, make sure we're connected. Say, yo, I heard you, on Kelly's podcast, Demand Base. Let's, and just ask me a question, whatever. So that's the best way to find me. You can, of course, find the book anywhere they ask you answer. And you can email me too directly, Marcus@marcussheridan.com if you have a question, Marcus@marcussheridan.com.
just gave out the email. Man, you were going to be hearing from people. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really enjoyed the conversation and learned so much. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast. Have a great day.